You're listening to the Boss Yourself First podcast, Season 3, Episode 19.
Welcome back to Boss Yourself First, where we explore what it means to lead yourself with permission and purpose. I'm Robin White, your host, and this season, we've been talking about what happens when we stop performing for approval and start leading from authenticity. Today, I'm joined by someone who embodies that courage beautifully, Jenn Todling. Jenn is an author, executive coach, and professor at the University of Denver, where she teaches both in the accounting department and the Frontline Manager Leadership Program, where I teach as well. Before this chapter, Jenn was a partner at E&Y, and she made the bold decision to reimagine what success could look like. As I mentioned, Jenn is also an author, and her book, Dancing on My Own 2 Feet, chronicles her journey of rediscovery. I have to tell you, Jenn has been so generous to me as she's a little bit ahead on her publication journey. She shared some of the ins and outs of life as a published author and invited me to share an author panel with her at the University of Denver. So having her here feels extra special. Welcome, Jenn.
Oh, Robin, that was so sweet. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. And your book title, Dancing on My Own 2 Feet, it just carries such energy and imagery and physicality. There's a beautiful integration there. And before we dig into your work, I'm curious, what made you decide to write a book?
Well, I got this advice later in my journey, but I think it perfectly describes, especially if you're an aspiring author, when to know if you should write a book. And for me, it was write the book you have to write. And for me, I had a story and I had an experience that wouldn't leave me. I knew I needed to share that. I love to write. I always wanted to write a book. I thought I would write a leadership book, a little bit more like yours. I thought it was going to be a little bit more, thought leadership. And when I started the journey, I gave myself permission to play and be creative. And as I did that, I loved writing scenes. I loved writing like as if it was fiction, bringing the experience to life. And so it turned into a memoir. And I just let the journey sort of unfold as it needed to. And some stuff made it to the final book, some stuff didn't, right? But I just allowed myself to play. And really the impetus was serve as an inspiration for others who may have gone through challenging circumstances and see that there could be hope on the other side.
And it sure does that. I'm so glad you wrote that book.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you did. The leadership book may still be coming.
It's still percolating. It's percolating now.
Yeah. Well, in this season here on the podcast, we have been leveraging the permission principles framework from my book. So the first of those principles is approach, and it's about turning toward what's true before you even know what to do about it. It's that moment we start observing and exploring instead of just pushing through. So what were the early whispers for you? Take us back to that moment when you realized you had stopped dancing and that you were ready to start dancing to a new rhythm.
Yeah, I think the thing that comes to mind and is very resonant for me right now was this permission to acknowledge and honor the wisdom in my body. So learning, I think part of my journey was I had a very strong intuition as a young adult. I knew what felt right or wrong for me, and I ignored it. And that led to a very challenging decade of my life and the events that followed. And so I think for me, part of reclaiming my sense of self was honoring the wisdom in my body. And dance, and I didn't know this at the time that this was going to have that power, but I feel it in my bones literally now. Dance allowed me in a very playful, passionate way of something that was, important to me as a child to enter a space that really connected me to my body. And because I was not dancing alone, I was choosing to dance in partnership. My body knew what I needed before I did. It allowed me to connect with another person and really listen. When you're dancing, especially a dance like the tango, you have to be really connected to your partner. And so I think that dance brought a lot of healing because it showed me that, yeah, my body has wisdom here and honoring it can guide me in the right direction.
That is super powerful. And I just, for my listeners who are not familiar with your book, and some may have read it already or encountered it already, we're talking not just a metaphorical dance, we're talking about physical dancing. And so I love that one of the first areas of awareness that you had was feedback from your body, kind of cueing you that it was time to find the rhythm again, to align with a new rhythm. So building on that, my husband was at PricewaterhouseCoopers before he chose to join a partnership at a boutique consulting firm. So I know the grind that it takes to get to Big Four partner role and what an accomplishment that is. You were thriving in a world that prizes certainty and performance. How did you start discerning the difference between that external success and internal alignment? And I know you sort of edged in there talking about the body a little bit, but tell me how you kind of brought those two, what seemed dissonant things together.
Yeah. So for me, I think part of my secret weapon, spending 20 plus years in public accounting, and I actually just rejoined a new firm. So I'm back in public accounting, but I think my secret to success was quarterly vacations. So in this sort of second chapter of my life, I was very diligent in being deep in the technical and the grind, so to speak, and stepping away. It's really hard sometimes to tap into, what's right for us or next for us when we're surrounded by noise. And so for me, those sort of quiet whispers came when I was on vacation. So the first came probably 3 years before I decided to leave EY on a beach in Hilton Head, right? Where I was like, what if this is my last busy season? Like it was a quiet knowing of, hey, I have choice here. I have agency. I get to decide. And I sat with that. I worked through that with my coach. We both are coaches, but we also need coaching. And I worked with that with my coach of sitting with that. What does that look like? Holding space for that. And then it was like, 6 months later, a year later, I'm in Sedona on a retreat and being like, maybe now is the time. Maybe actually I feel that now is the time. And then you get back into your day to day and you wrestle with that and the certainty and the fear and the vulnerability and all of those things kind of start to happen. So it was sort of those moments of stepping away that allowed those whispers. And then I didn't ignore them. But I also didn't take immediate action. I allowed myself to sit with it until it felt like this was sort of that moment to maybe take a bigger leap.
That is so on point with the idea of approaching. But I want everyone to tune into the fact that you were super intentional about this approach. You made space to really look and reflect on what was going on, and you got curious. I love how you had the question, what if this was my last busy season?
Yeah.
What would that look like? And I love that. I love it. I think that it's not easy.
Yeah.
It takes an intentional act, but it is so powerful. So because you coach clients now, so when they're in this season, what are some of the first signals you notice that tell you someone's out of alignment or hasn't noticed it yet or maybe named it yet?
Yeah, especially after shifting myself, people have flocked to me a little bit, right? Like, how did you do that? Or I might want to do that too, right? So some of it's just a curiosity. So I think sometimes envy, or if we feel jealous of something, or we have that desire, that's a good signal that there's something in there that you probably are looking for yourself. So that was just a noticing as I left, as people were coming to me curious, like, okay, that's probably saying there's something in what I'm doing that appeals to you. And also I find, and I work with a lot of accountants and we like to be in our head, right? We like to be in that logical space. We like to analyze it, figure it out, solve the problem. A lot of this tuning in happens in our heart, in our body, like outside of our head, right? It's in other spaces, in the stillness. And so oftentimes the first thing I suggest if people seem like they're just caught in a swirl is to start a practice of taking a 10 to 30-minute walk in nature every day in silence. Not with the AirPods, not listening to the podcast, not listening to the music.
Not on your phone.
Not on your phone. Like, leave the phone at home. I keep my phone because I have coyotes that like to follow me. And so I do sometimes from a safety, but don't engage with it. And just still your mind. And I find that if people do that for 1 to 2 weeks, the noise starts to quiet and then they get clarity on, oh, actually, this is what I'm wanting to, get get more insight into or maybe learn more about.
You said two things that I want to recap and tell me if I get them wrong. One was you help your clients notice if they're getting some of these feelings like jealousy or envy. And I think that is such an empowering permission, because a lot of times these are uncomfortable and sometimes labeled ugly emotions. And I think that you saying, but let's notice them and let's get the data from them. Why are they showing up? Because there's something that you're seeing that is resonating with you and that is calling to you. And let's not miss that.
Yes.
And I like the way it puts the value around what sometimes we label as bad emotions and should be relegated and not experienced or distracted from or distanced from, but instead approached, explored, unpacked, get that data. Perfect. The second thing that you said was pause, create that space for reflection. And it can be as simple as just consistent time in nature. It doesn't even have to be massively long. This is not, I have to take an expensive beach vacation. This is consistently take 10, 20, 30 minutes walking daily without distractions, completely unplugged, so that you start honing in those listening skills, internal skills, inspired and probably activated by the nature around you.
Yes. Point on. Exactly.
I love it. It helps you find the rhythm.
It does. Absolutely.
Fantastic. All right, that's so good. Awareness itself is super courageous. As we said, it takes intention and it takes courage. It's not always comfortable to admit that something doesn't fit anymore. We tend to like our comfort zones. Even if they're not our ideal, we tend to want to stay with them because we're comfortable. How did you stay curious instead of critical when you first started kind of approaching the idea of a big change?
Yeah, I think I gave myself, I wasn't probably super conscious of this, but I allowed myself permission to take the time that I needed to prepare for a big change. There is a part of me that wants to, once I have an idea, like, no, this really is my last busy season, like I'm going to make it happen. And there was a part of me that was like ready to activate that. And I think as I sat with that, more of my analytical side said, and okay, am I ready to walk away from my life as a partner? Do I feel complete? Do I feel complete? Or is there more that I want to experience? And part of that was even just financially. I wanted to have a different threshold so that I could have freedom to have a chapter, a year or 2 years to play and not be worried about the money. And so for me, that meant I needed more time to build that. And so I set out with intention of, okay, I need to build this and take steps to prepare myself. And there's a lot, still that needed to be prepared that I didn't know about, but at least I had an intention of, I'm going to give myself the time. And I did have people who were encouraging me to maybe leave earlier. And I had people who thought I was crazy for leaving at all. Right. And so I had to just get really comfortable with myself of, it doesn't matter what other people think. I had to know in my body, do I feel peace with the pace, with the decision? And that's what matters.
Are you guys hearing her analytical mind at work? I hear it. What I love, Jenn, is how you have really integrated your analytical thinking, your intuition, body-based intuition particularly, and also your heart,
Yeah.
those feelings. So I think that that is inspiring. And I see that in your book as well. I see that the evolution of that. So I love that the practical bit around not only do I just create space to be curious, but I created a plan to even create more space. And very practically, I need financial space. I need to not have to worry about the money and to be able to take this time to really decide what my next step is, my next evolution. That kind of moves us into the adjust principle. So that's when we often hit that messy middle piece. You alleviated some of that mess in the financial planning, but you still got pushback from people that probably made you think and rethink and think again, and eventually came to even more clarity probably. But just having a little bit of that resistance really does help you sort through and sift through those intentions and what that could look like. So let's look at the adjust phase. This is where we unlearn that old choreography and try and find a new rhythm. Leaving a high-level corporate role for something unknown takes such bravery. What adjustments, and I'm talking emotional, mental, practical, surprised you in the transition?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to have a little bit of like ignorance is bliss, right? Because if you know everything that's waiting for you, it's scarier to jump. So I don't think I fully appreciated how big of a leap that was until I took it. And I'm so glad I did. And I'm so glad I did. But it was a lot to process. And part of that was this was the first time in my professional, really adult life that I didn't have the structure. I didn't have the stability. There were still bills to pay, And so I think I struggled with the mindset a lot of letting go. Even though I had a safety net and it wasn't a short safety net, I still worried what happens when the money runs out. And I had anxiety about that. I also, I started my own business. And so I leaned into coaching and teaching and facilitating. And I was finishing a master's degree. And so I loved being able to design my day. So I loved being able to have the space to figure out how I work best. I didn't have that feeling when I was sort of in a system at that time. So I could figure out, how much open space on my calendar do I need? How much connection with community do I need? How much exercise do I need? How much reflection time, right? So I got to experiment with all of that. And so that was really, really cool. And I think I had to just allow myself some grace that this was new. I was like a toddler learning to walk. And so I didn't know what it was like to run my own business and to market, my book and to market my services. And I didn't like it. I didn't like it. And ultimately that also helped me, this summer as I was wrapping up the book tour and like our event was like my caboose, right, on my book events. I had to also sit with the fact that there were things I loved about this chapter and there were things that I felt I brought to completion and that I wanted to be in a system again. And I didn't expect to go back to accounting. That wasn't like part of the master plan. And I found a place and a culture and a team where I was like, oh, I can be my authentic self, So I think it's also giving yourself permission to reimagine or to not hold on to this certain vision of it has to look this way forever. And one of my coaches really helped me because as I was kind of wrangling with what was next, she said, it could be what you're saying or something even better. And it ended up being something even better than I was imagining. And so I guess I would just offer that it takes a lot of faith in yourself to sit with the discomfort of trying on a new identity. And for me, it was tapping into a lot of that intuition and sort of how does my body feel? Do I feel at peace or am I waking up at 3 a.m. in a panic attack? And that's telling me if I'm going in the right direction.
Gosh, there was a lot there.
There's a lot there.
So much is super valuable, super rich. So a couple of things that I noticed that I think might be surprising is because when we're in this process of working through and we've created the space and we have the intention and we're leaning into curiosity, I think when you hear that from the outside, it sounds super exciting, but it can also be disorienting. I heard you say that I went from the superstructure to a place where I could be anything. My options are limitless and I got to figure this out. And I had to run my own business and figure out marketing and all of these pieces. And I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the journey. And now you're going back into a more structured environment and can relish that, but you're coming as a different person. It's not like you're bouncing. We just had did 2 episodes on bouncing forward and not back. And so it's not like you're trying to fit back into who Jenn was when she was at EY. You're bouncing forward now as an author and a coach and a professor and all of these, you're bringing all of these new experiences into this environment along with the clarity of what you need and what resonates with you and what are the spaces that you really shine in and what are the things that drain your energy and all of that coming together for this next chapter. So I want to circle back to some of your work with leaders, leaders who are high achievers, people who look confident on the outside, but are quietly questioning what's next. How do you help them create these new definitions of success? And then how do you help them also, because sometimes there's a real letting go in that process, in that journey. There's almost a grief element to it when we're leaving something that we thought was our version of success and trying on a new one. How do you help them manage and transition that?
Yeah, and I think it can look different for different people. And so I think kind of what we talked about a little bit earlier is it doesn't have to be a complete overhaul of your life. You can start with small experiments, right? So, and I did start with small experiments. I did 3 years of experimenting at EY to be like, maybe there's just a different balance. And so I did try all of those and it worked really well for me until it didn't, until it was like, and now I need the next evolution. So I would always encourage people to start small, right? So if you're trying to, and maybe you've just been mastering what you're doing and you need some variety. So is there a new project, a new line of experimentation you can play with? And that might be in your job, it might be outside of it. So for me, that was cultivating coaching and having kind of coaching as a side element that supplemented my accounting work. And I did that internally with EY. So it wasn't like I was doing that on my own, but it allowed me to experiment and play like, do I like this? And then writing, right? Let me be writing my book while I am employed. So what can you add that might just give you a taste before you kind of make a big leap? And then the other thing I would say is there's also value. And I work with a lot of leaders where I find where this comes up the most is sort of like where I'm at, like this mid-career. You've been in a profession maybe 20, 25 years, but you still got like 15 or 20 years to go. I think there's value also in just disrupting the pattern. And so like for me, I had to just completely walk away from accounting. I had to like lean into all the other things to really feel that, try it on. And there were things I liked and things I didn't. And to your point, now I can say, okay, now I am a coach. I am a facilitator. I am a human. And I can do that in a system, in a function of supporting accounting and auditing. It doesn't have to be either or because I'm more integrated, but I couldn't have done that 18 months ago in the same way.
Yes. And I think you really transitioned us into the last principle, which is ACT, those small steps. And we've kind of talked about this all season. We don't have to jump all the way from point A to point Z. There's a whole alphabet of small steps in between those things. And even just moving from A to B can give you some of that data, some of that feedback around, is this a good next step? So I think that's lovely. And you have built this amazing portfolio as a coach and an educator and an author. And yes, you have just pivoted into a new chapter. And I saw your LinkedIn post about this, I think it was about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's very new.
And I loved what you said. You said that you had taken an 18-month pause and pivot to go all in on your dreams. And now you joined, is it Aprio? Am I saying that right? Aprio.
Yep.
Aprio. As managing director of the professional practice group. So congrats. That's exciting. But what I really loved about your post was you said, trusting the magic of new beginnings, because I think that's super aligned with this episode. But I'm curious, how did you continue to stay in that place of self-trust? And what would you recommend, or do you recommend to your clients or to our listeners to cultivate that self-trust?
Yeah, for me, again, so I decided this summer I wanted to explore going back into an organization, and I was applying to like a lot of different things, right? And I got a job offer before this that I said yes to, and woke up the next morning and realized it was not aligned. Like I had a panic attack in the middle of the night. Like I can't do this. And so I asked some questions to see like maybe there are some shifts that would allow this to be feasible. And there weren't, unfortunately. And I had to trust myself enough. Like when I asked the question, I knew if the answer is no, then it's a no for me. And I had to be okay with that. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. Like it wasn't easy.
I think it wasn't easy, right?
It wasn't easy. All right. It wasn't easy. And I think you might have seen me on one of those days. I was like, this isn't easy. And then literally like a week later, this opportunity came with ease and aligned with what I was looking for and even more than I was asking for. And so that was confirmation for me. So you guys are getting this great, beautiful arc where it finishes in a lovely place to say, because I said no to something that wasn't aligned, I was able to say yes to something that was. And that made more sense because of how it worked out. But it just validated for me that trusting my intuition led me to a place that feels really good and integrating all of the parts of me where I can contribute.
So good. All right. So I like to be super practical. And since we're talking about little micro steps, what's one tiny step that listeners right here today could take to move toward, not all the way to Z, but to move toward authenticity and alignment?
I would say do something in your body. So take a dance class, go for a run, play pickleball, like something where you're removing yourself from the situation. Put on your favorite song and do a 2-minute dance break. Like you can do that right now. Right? And then just
Yes.
start. You don't have to do anything with it, but just notice if something comes up, write it down, and then move on and try it again. But the more we do that, the more we tune in, that you will get breadcrumbs that will say, here, this is the next direction to guide you. And just trust that.
Yeah, a breadcrumb moment. I like that. I think that's super freeing. And I think it's part of that recognition that readiness is not a feeling. You're not like, I feel ready, so let's go. It's a choice.
Yep.
I'm going to work my way to ready. I'm going to dance my way to ready. So, and I think that's kind of what this permission to dance really means. Trusting yourself enough to move, even if you're still learning the steps.
I love that.
I love that. Yes. So Jenn, this has been a joy. And your story reminds us that reinvention isn't about returning to an old rhythm. It's about finding the courage to move with the new rhythm offered in each new season. So I think that is powerful. And before we close, I want to give you just a small space here to share a little more about your beautiful book, Dancing on My Own 2 Feet. It captures a lot of what we've talked about with clarity and courage and creativity. And I know my listeners are going to love it. It's been out 6 months?
Almost 6 months. Yep.
6 months, yeah. So I'm curious, as an author myself, but also because we haven't just caught up in a bit, what have you heard from your readers that surprised you?
You know, I was thinking about this actually right before we came on. Honestly, I've had so much love through this book. And what has surprised me is that it's like there's such a journey to publish, to write, all the things, but the gift in having it out in the world is that it's helping me understand myself better. So I'm getting therapy through readers' experiences and reflections of what is resonating with them. And it's helping me actually understand myself better and how I made some of the choices that I did. And so I didn't expect that. And that's been just a really, really beautiful gift for me.
A gift that keeps on giving.
It is. So what are we going to learn tomorrow? I don't know.
Okay, so where can listeners find your book?
Yeah, so it's available anywhere books are sold. I am an indie author, so if you have a local indie bookstore, you can order it from there. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and then on my website, jenntodling.com. It has links to all the places where you can access it. And I did narrate the audiobook, so if you like audiobooks, I think that's a really beautiful way to experience it.
Oh, you and I are gonna have to talk about that.
Yeah.
We'll do that later. But I do want to, that's my next stage. See, she's just a little bit further on.
I have people for you.
I love it. Thank you. So outside of reading your book, which is a wonderful way to connect with Jenn, but literally connecting with you, is there anything you'd like to share with the audience about how they can kind of learn from you beyond what's in the book?
Yeah, the best way is to subscribe to my free Substack. It's Soul Spark with Jenn Todling, and I have a weekly newsletter where I share little moments of inspiration. They're bite size. It's mom friendly, dad friendly, parent friendly, like life friendly. And that's a really great way to just stay connected on what's going on in my world.
Thank you, friend, and thank you for taking time. Do you feel up for a quick lightning round?
Let's do it.
Okay, all right. Here we go. So, what's a song that makes you feel brave?
Oh, probably Brave.
Yeah, is that Sarah Bareilles?
Sarah Bareilles, yeah. Or Fight Song, yeah.
Fight Song's one of my favorites, yes.
Fight Song's a good one too.
Yes. Okay, so what's a book that you wish you had written?
The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
Yes. All right. And feel free to draw from that for the next question here. A quote that grounds you when you feel uncertain.
If you think you can or you can't, you're right. By Henry Ford.
Yes. All right. Last one. What's bringing you joy in this new season?
My daughter. My daughter is. Yeah.
Excellent. Does she dance?
She does. And she's a little more of a hip hopper. She's got sass and attitude. So that's kind of fun to see projected in a 7-year-old.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a lot of fun.
So fun. All right. So I want to end our time together, and thank you again. I want to end the way we've ended actually each episode this season, with a permission slip, not from me or Jenn, but to our listeners, for them to offer to themselves. So here's our permission slip for this episode. It's an invitation to trust your next beginning. So even if you don't yet see all the choreography here, give yourself permission to begin to dance, to listen for the rhythm that's calling you forward. Because reinvention is not about erasing your past. It's about giving each and every version of you into that next movement. The old steps come and they're made new with a new rhythm and a new life, freely and with lots of courage. And if you need a little inspiration for that journey, grab a copy of Jenn's book, Dancing on My Own 2 Feet. It is beautiful and inspiring for anyone learning to move again after a change. Jenn, thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your warmth, your rhythm with us today. And to our listeners, keep giving yourselves permission to approach what's true, adjust as you grow, and act with courage. Because leading yourself like it matters, matters. All right, take care, everybody.